Welcome to episode 4, Painting Dark Sword. This one's going to be another acrylic demo, but I grabbed sort of a classic figure here, and what I wanted to emphasize on this one was color schemes. And some of us have go-to color schemes, especially if you do this often enough, like me. So you see we got some pictures up on the screen. I'm going to take you to, here's the blog post that shows you. This is sort of my go-to thing. For the longest time I did blue cloaks, and I did usually red interiors on those. This one I switched up a little bit to the yellow, but I kind of had the blonde here and the blue cloak. It was a nice way to contrast things. And the foliage then, when it was green, like you see here, it added an extra color to it. And I think as I scroll down here, you can see one more that actually has some. So here's the other one. So you can see how the green starts to blend together, but there's kind of that brownish dark red interior on the cloak. I know you can't see my mouse scrolling around out here. This gives you a better view of that. This is another one of my go-to things here. So you have the kind of burgundy interior of the coat, and then you have the grayish green. So that's another one. Now let's say you really want to do something different. Well, here you go. So you've got the magentas and the purples, and on the back of the cloak it's more of a bluish purple. And once again you have the blonde here to juxtapose against the purple of the robe. So I just wanted to show you this, and what I wanted to do here was more of something along the lines of this classic thing. So you've got the blonde here. We'll have that blue cloak, but with a hint of greenishness to it, right? And what I may do is either a red interior here with more of a yellowish tan skirt here. Do the blonde here. This may be sort of a reddish brown. And then you'll have your skin tones. This, I'm not sure. This may also be a brown. We'll figure this out when we get to it. Maybe this will be a deep dark red, and this will be a lighter, almost sort of a burnt sienna. And we've got a rock out here. So there'll be a little bit of gray to play the blue off of. Now, we've got the usual here. We've got the Reaper liners and clears. Speaking of blue, we've got a few more liners here. You almost always see brown and blue together. I'm starting to use red that much more. We've got these are off-whites. So you have the maggot white Maiden Flesh. And I always usually have some secret weapon colors. So here you got the verdigris, pale green. Every so often, maybe we'll throw in maybe something like this we can use as handlewood. That might be good for the dress or whatever. We can also use a little bit of clear yellow right here. So we'll see which direction we want to go with this. As far as the brushes go, you've seen these before. These are the green handle number 8 rounds. So what we're going to do is we're going to flatten out one of these into a nice sort of a filbert shape here. So here's one that I've got prepped, ready to go. So see that? And this is dried out. This doesn't have any moisture in it at all. Once it has moisture in it, look at that, nice. Let's compare these. Here, let's get some moisture on this too. So you see the width of those is the same until, boom, look at that. And that's handy when you want to work on, see this cloak here, so I can cover more area, I can do more glazing and that sort of thing. So that is important. And here you go. This is what they look like. You can see that is not bad for 12 brushes. You see how they start out pristine, and once you wear them down, they become a sort of a utility brush. You can get those either at Hobby Lobby in store or on their website. We may use some of these makeup sponges. We'll see what happens. I just have them around just in case. So here we go. We're going to get into this. We're going to try a classic color scheme in our go-to color scheme theme. We've got our colors situated out on the palette. Let's check that out. You can see there are not a bazillion colors on this palette. We've got the essentials really, because we have a yellow, and we've got our yellow, red, and blue. I've got a red liner over here, a blue liner, and a brown liner. For now, for the moment at least, the yellow liner, or the yellow is going to be sepia liner. Now let's start to pull these out, and you can see why I'm going to consider that my yellow. And now we've got our red liner over here and our clear red, and you can see right straight away makes a nifty little burgundy right there. What the heck? Let's start doing this. Let's go. And I'm going to go with that red interior here, and then I'm going to go more with a lighter colored dress. Why not? So this is again my usual type thing. Not sure how it ended up that way. Not quite sure. But you can see I'm taking advantage of this little bit of pre-shading I did with primer. I could just brush it on, but in this case I did it with my Badger airbrush, and all it is Stynylrez. It comes in 12 different colors, so you can do pre-shading to your heart's delight in many different ways. So I'm just going to get these little interior bits filled in. Don't worry about staying in the lines or anything like that. It's just not important. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take this red liner, a little bit of the sepia. Let's go with some of the blue here. And we're going to start to work our way into our ground. Just looking to get a few different dark tones in here. I'm just going to make sure you can see that. So I just switched over to a little bit of sepia liner here. And you can see this is not a, how would you say it? It's not a complete and total glaze. And oh look, I might even add a little bit of maiden flesh, and now it's not quite so opaque. And see how that's turned it into a nifty looking gray. But I tell you, the thing that really, I didn't think it was real at first, and boy did it break my heart to see it when I saw a set of 10 colors, so to speak, and they were, it was a set of 10 grays. And somebody was charging $50 for 10 jars of dead gray paint. And I said, wow, that's unfortunate. Because as you can see, you really don't need those grays. It's plenty easy enough to make a bazillion different grays. That one, that looks like a bluish gray. Say I'd used this one here. I think it's called maggot white or whatever. That, well, let's do it. Why not? Here, let's party on with. So look at the difference here. I'm gonna make this bigger. Make that bigger. And what we're going to do is, see how now that becomes a more of a bluish gray. I'm going to go in and throw that there, and oh look, makes a pretty nifty foundation. Remember, I wanted to have a bluish gray robe there. Here, let's a little bit of that clear blue in there. I know people really are afraid to mix. They think they just can't do it. Here, let's make this smaller again. But really, once you just try it a few times, just try it on your palette, see what you can mix. You know, don't even worry about the figure itself. Just mix a few colors, see what you get. Now let's darken this up. So we're going to add a little more blue, but also a little more blue liner. So you can see this glaze, as it moves down, becomes darker, Because guess what? We're getting away from the sky and the light source. Look at that, and I think you'll see it's already starting to match a little bit of the tone from the reference there. I sort of try to have as many reference pictures as I can for you, because a lot of times people want to match colors. I know I have to do it all the time, so all the time. Just probably 99% of the things I paint have to match something. So there's times where somebody just hands you a figure to paint and you just need to come up with something on the spot. Alright, so we've got our blue established here. What I'm going to do is take blue and brown and essentially just make a black, because like I always say in the shaded base coat phase, this is sort of the glazing version of, oh yeah, that's right, it was the wet version of shaded base coat, because we're doing it mostly in glazing. But let's just kill this, because all of a sudden colors that were dark look a little less dark. Now I'm gonna see what happens. Let's take a little bit of that here. Let's get a little more of the sepia liner in there. I'm actually going to throw in a touch of the red, warm that up a bit. And we're just going to get in here. And we're going to hit this right here. Doesn't even matter if that red leaches into it, because guess what? While it's not reflected light, say of object source lighting or shiny metal, colors reflect. That's just how it is. Now I am going to leave this go for now. I'm going to throw something on the hair. And what I'm going to do is throw a touch of that clear yellow out on the palette here. Well, that's rare, me cleaning the brush. Doesn't happen a lot. Guess it's an old oil painting habit. Yeah, let's get a touch more of this sepia liner going in this. And I notice she's got some sort of a veil, or I don't know quite what that is on her head. But there's also what looks like feathers over here. So that is something I try not to study the figures too much before I do these. Because if I'm doing something that I've done 1,000 times, it's kind of obvious. And of course, something that you've done 1,000 times is probably going to work really seamlessly. And I almost want people to see things be more difficult. Because when they maybe struggle themselves, they start to think, geez, must be me. And it's not, it's just they're going through the natural struggle. So I'm just going to let the blue and yellow combine on those feathers. We'll do something with those later. Now this, I got to figure out what's going to happen here. Now what I like to maybe do is carry some of this blue over here, but not quite so dark. Let's grab a little of this. There's enough junk in my brush there. Ooh, that sounds weird. We'll just do this. And we'll just say paint in the brush. We won't use that phrase anymore. And what we may do later on, depending, who knows, maybe we throw in some of this. Something I was going to mix in the blue of the cloak back here anyways. Yeah, so that's not too bad. And what I'm going to do here Let's take an even lighter version of that. That's that maiden. Nah, it's that maggot white stuff. Whatever. I'm just going to throw this up here. What I'll do is throw a glaze or two over that. Maybe make it somewhat on the translucent side. Who knows? And I'm just going to screwing around here, throwing a little bit of lighter colors on that. Again, to me, it's all sort of part of the shaded base coat. And I'm going to mess around with this while we've got, a lighter color on the brush. It's going to mix into that color I just put into it. And even though this is not completely dry, all I want to do here, again, is figure out lights and darks. Get that primer covered out of the way, because you can see how having all this primed area here next to all this stuff, it screws up the context. We can't really tell what it is that we've got. And we'll do just a bit more here. Won't get too crazy with this. Just gonna throw a few little bursts of this lighter blue here and there. You don't have to wet blend if you don't want to. Again, we're going to be going over that a few times, so no big deal. Now, that's already dry while I got this. I'm trying to make sure that's somewhat in focus for you. Just trying to tell what's hair and what's not. So maybe that's not. So there is a little, it's kind of a crown tip. So I see something that's here. All right, so the hair works its way around it. So this part is hair. Now, the staff, I'm going to grab some red liner, a touch of the sepia liner. Let's go touch of yellow here. Trying to make a little bit of a reddish brown, so it won't be quite as purple or regal red. And the idea is that this staff, in some parts of it, that's going to have to be more, say, greenish in some spots to get it a little bit aged. And the reason I went to this, you'll see pretty soon, is now that I've been working in these more reddish tones, it's a perfect time to take a little bit of Maiden Flash, touch of yellow. Let's grab some of our white there, some of that maggot white. Let's see just how. So there is our skin tone. Oh, look at that. I just made it from junk colors that are essentially just sitting out here on the palette. This is pretty much a mid-tone, because I just want to get that primer covered up. That's all. Now this can be difficult, and boy, I say this every single video that I do. People have I think maybe the toughest time people have with this is you've got what can look like a colossal mess or something that just looks, they hate it, looks hideous. They say, oh my gosh, it's terrible, it's awful, I screwed it up, whatever, and no, that's pretty much what it was supposed to be. So I'm going to just mark out these feathers now. They're dry. They're not necessarily going to be this white, but if I don't mark them out now, I'll probably forget about them. You don't have to use the craft brushes like this either. It's all up to you. If you're not comfortable with it, you don't have to force yourself. I just say, give it a try. You're out $5. That's about it. And if you don't like it, you have brushes you can use for terrain or for basing or just for kicking around or giving to your kids. And just like I did on the robe, paint on the face is not really even dry yet. Already going in here, picking out the cheekbones, potential areas of light. So we got the clavicles there, down the chest, onto the arms. Already starting to think, I don't want that to catch too much light. Hand here, definitely going to have to catch light. Now, dark sword figures, one of the reasons I like them is you've got more finely sculpted faces, hands. They are essentially more true scale. So the hands are not baseball gloves, and heads are not pumpkins. The eyes are not like manga type drawings, or they tend to be more humanly proportioned, I guess. I like that because, again, as a former portrait artist, I look at those and I say, yeah, okay, that's something that I would draw myself. And you can already see how we're starting to establish some lights and darks here. Let's take a little bit of this clear yellow. Now, I don't necessarily want the hair to be brilliant blonde. See, okay, there's a little something here, almost like a hairpin here. And there's definitely some kind of decor here. There's something hanging down. Now, this may be based off of a Larry Elmore painting. It seems on the more newish side of the figurine, so it could be a Parkinson, any one of a number of fantastic artists. I think one of the super duper dark sword things that I might do is, and I've got some of these figures kind of in the works, is take one of these figures that's based off of, say, an Elmore painting, and then try to make the same vignette of the 2D art. So that'll involve a little terrain work, some basing. That'll happen when I get the equipment to set up the bigger filming area. There's no way that would fit under here. That would be way too challenging. So you can see I'm doing the same sort of thing. And again, this is, for those of you that are more familiar with how I work, this is starting to look a little bit more like the classic shaded base coat technique right here. So you can see it didn't take long to establish this. Now, again, don't want to get stuck in an area too long. So here's some red liner and our clear red, and guess what? Just some stuff that's in our paint. We're not going to use not going to use junk in the brush anymore. Although that can make a really nifty t-shirt. I don't think I should make stickers of it, though, despite the temptation. All right. Well, I don't know. If you want to see junk on a brush, t-shirts, maybe leave that in the comments. Because apparently I don't know if it's because of fatigue or whatever, because these are typically filmed very late at night. I've dropped a couple of puns, we'll call that. Notice how I'm not using as much of the yellow to lighten this as I normally do. I actually went with a little of the Maiden Flash, because this, I don't want the orangey red. I think you saw that one cloak here. Let's go back to it. I think it is it this one right here? See how that reddish cloak. There's even a little yellow and browns in there. So that's what I'm looking for. Now after I do this red, see how much lighter that's getting, but it also, see it's a little bit grayer. Here, let's get rid of some of that excess paint. Let's just draw this up here. So you can see I don't do that classic layering. Okay, we're going to paint the entire red area all at once, from lightest to darkest, or darkest to lightest, sorry, other way around. Nope, that is not, it's not how shaded base coat works. The midtones are that way. So this is as light as I'm going to get with that, because again, I need to see context, and context means this piece right here. I'm going to throw out that sepia liner once again, and let's play with that a bit. Let's mess around with that. Let's try a couple of different things here. I'm going to try that little bit of the maiden flesh in there. And if this turns out to be, see, that's a little bit too, that's too warm. Don't want it to be quite so warm. And I know that now because I've got everything else in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to take maybe some of this secret weapon right here. Say, what in the world are you doing with this? And we're going to combine that with our sepia liner. It's going to be lighter. Aha. It's also going to be a little bit more grayed down. So a little less on the yellow side. And you can see, just like I did on the back look, heck, I might wipe some of that away with my hand. The folds also tend to be sculpted more nicely as well. See that nice draping fold right there? You'd be amazed at how often these days you see that just either have no fold whatsoever, or really odd looking folds. Certainly nothing you would ever find in nature, at least not any fabric I know of. And since I'm actually engaged in sculpting some cloth myself right now, trying to do folds, I can definitely sympathize with how difficult that is, whether it's digital, green stuff, Sculpey, whatever you're using. Let's see how I'm using more of the filbert style piece of the brush. It's not a dry brush that we're using here. And I've held the piece on its side, and I'm just working my way around this. I don't know how much lighter I want to go with this. I'm going to go a touch lighter here. And you say, Jim, that's too much. Oh, good. I wipe some away. But remember, this is not about establishing a perfect set of, a layer cake of shading. This is still shaded base coat. We are maybe looking at the clock here about 23 minutes into this. And that's not a horrible establishment of colors for 23 minutes. Especially since we're creating catchphrases at the same time. So I'm going to just throw a little greenery there. Remember that gray that we were talking about? Oh, look, we have some of that right here. Still there on the palette. I don't use a wet palette. I know those are super popular these days. But as someone that did watercolors for years and all that, palette was always wet anyway by default. So here I'm gonna, I think that's a better place for you to see it. I had to really alter my camera settings for the last couple of videos for basing and for large size stuff and fluorescent paints. So hopefully I've got those back to normalcy. And I'm going to throw a little more maiden flesh in there. Like so. That's probably going to also be covered up with some kind of glazes, foliage of some kind. Now these feathers over here, not sure if I called them leaves before. I actually did think they were leaves, not sure why, but they're pretty much feathers. I'm just going to gray those down a bit, knock them down. Again, still trying to determine exactly what we want to do here. I may do some kind of red gemstones up there. I'm actually going to gray this down a bit. And guess what? That gray looks an awful lot like color of the dress there. See how down here there's a little bit of a reddish tone to that fold. Here I'll have a little bit of gray in this to make it seem like it's reflecting the color of the rocks. Just a smidge there. We needed something a little lighter. Why not do that? Alright, and let's go and bring out the clear yellow again. We're going to just restore a few colors on this. Let's go with our maggot white, basically our off-white blue, and maiden flesh, our off-white red. Poof. And I'm going to move this water out of the way. That's been definitely getting in my way. Let's do something like this. Let's see, do we want it to be that? Right, I kind of like that. It'll end up being toned down a little bit by the glazes we're going to throw on it. So see, I'm not sure if actually some of these bits are here, or if those again are, I was real tempted to call them dangly bits. I didn't say that. You didn't hear that. But we're just going to make that a little bit brighter blonde here. It's just going to cascade down here like so. The nifty thing about this, again, so even as it's a sharp point, what can I do? I'm going to drop it on its side. I'm even going to, you know how I always preach about keeping your hands off the metal? Well, guess what? If I keep my hands off the metal, kind of hold the brush in a more relaxed fashion like so. Yeah, I can just drag that across. My hands, I've been doing an awful lot of work, and my hands are a complete mess right now, my fingers, so I'm trying not to get those on screen, at least not close. And now this has a little bit of green to it here, right? Because why not? You can always tone that down. Originally that was actually intended for over here, but it got hijacked along the way. So let's do our feathers, not leaves. Yeah, I know that's green, but it's also a lighter color too. And just drop that in there, leave it go. And one more area to go here. We got that brown liner. Sorry about that. Ooh, let's see how that's pretty thin down. And let's throw in a touch of dark there. Now this technically would be in the next phase, but I just needed to see what I had here. Yeah, let's do that darker. All right, and that, I'm just going to darken that down too, because I just want these little bits to dry before I start the next segment here. So what we're going to do is we've got this pretty well established. We're going to work in the midtones. We're going to do some glazing of darks here also. Again, to keep the line moving, we're going to keep working around, not getting bogged down in any one spot. So we're going to play around with the midtones. That means not just painting midtones, but also setting up midtones. We can start that out. Let's say we take some of this sepia liner. We'll even throw in a touch of red there, just to liven that up a little bit. And what we'll do is hit the hair in a few spots here. So this is some of that glazing I was telling you about. So now the hair, I'm going to get rid of some of the extra. What this will do is make the hair a little bit warmer and contrast it away from potentially a very similar looking color on the dress. Do that back here. We don't want to wipe out all of this. It's as much tinting things as it is darkening things. So I'm going to say that's actually probably not, well, could very well be here. Alright, let's get this here too. Not too much. A little more there. And we should be good. Now, need to figure out what is going to happen with the darks on the face. So I'm going to make sure I get a little bit of this green in there and say, what in the world, green on her face? Well, see what that green and red just made? Again, we're going to make this bigger and hopefully remember to make it smaller when we start painting again. So, see that right there? We can even take a touch of the maiden flesh here, lighten that up. So what we've got is sort of as I make this bigger, now smaller. So, see now I've got myself kind of a flesh tone shadow color. And if I feel the need, I can grab just a touch of red and make it a little less gray. And what I'm going to do is throw a few little shadows in here. Now it's not going to look very shadowy, but it is a bit darker. It also grays down the shadows a little bit. There's not tons to worry about. But let's take that same color, move that around. So we're going to get it on some of our rocks over here, soil. You can see I like to just put colors everywhere. We're even going to throw a little bit of that on our staff here. I like that color synergy. And what we got here is maybe a darker top of the staff, and the staff down here is lighter. We have a dark next to a light here, and there's going to be lots of shadows down here. So we're trying to reverse things a little bit. And while I've got some of that green, I'm going to double down on that a little bit there. We got the knot in this little notch there. even on this bag that she's holding. Throw some of that green in there. So you can see it's constantly, we're moving around. I like to have the green down here towards the ground. Speaking of green, we're gonna tap on our foliage again a bit there. Maybe some on our rocks. It's gonna bring me back around to this blue here. And we haven't forgotten about our blues. We haven't messed with them in a while. So here we're gonna take that same, it's that verdigris pale green. I'm gonna take some of this maiden flesh. We'll lighten that up. See where we're at. Right about where we were. So I know that the mixing thing, folks get uncomfortable with that, but when you don't have a million colors to worry about, it can be easier to, oh yeah, I just kind of took a little bit of that green, threw it in some of the blue, and then I took maiden flesh and lighten it up, and we're going to continue to do that. So we're going to grab that maiden flesh again, we'll hit it once more, and you'll see that I try to, again, focus those lighter areas towards the top of the cloak, and you can see now that I warmed up this cascade of hair, this grayish blue starts to stand out more, even though it's I don't want to call it a highlight, it's a mid-tone at this point. In fact, it's almost kind of a dark mid-tone. But what it means is it won't overpower. It's gonna sink to the recesses because it is gonna be somewhat grayed down, because what are we using? We're using a reddish, basically a reddish off-white to lighten it. And I know it's a lot to throw at you, the whole, it's sounding a lot like color theory and everything else. I try not to do that, because most people didn't spend years and years and years trying to figure all that stuff out. So here we go. Now remember, we had a lighter version of this over here, so you can see how I rotate things back around again. This is almost going to be, I'm tempted to make this almost the same as these items on the head here. So here we go. We'll just lighten this up a bit. Keep going. And a little more here. So basically the main color here is going to be as light as the mid-tone here. And I'm almost to the point where, you know what, I may just grab a smaller brush here. But you notice I tried to establish a whole bunch of the rest of this before diving into a smaller brush. So we're still 40 minutes into this, and we're working with our original craft brush. Now I've got some newer ones. This one has a little bit, it got beat up earlier today, so it's got a little bit of a burr on the front of it. And look at the contrast we're starting to get here now. And so we will now just grab one of these smaller, kind of like these, it's a Winsor Newton, but it's sort of a next level down. It's the Cotman series. They are, I believe they're actually also a synthetic, so they take a little more punishment. And you can see I'm just gonna lighten some of this up. And at this point, not gonna screw around with lights anymore on this. I'm gonna see if I've got any blue liner left. I'm gonna throw some out then. Right here, it doesn't take a lot. And we'll mix a little bit of the blue with that. And let's establish a few nifty shadows here. And just a few, but not everywhere. I don't want it to be intensely dark everywhere, just in a few key spots. I think another one here maybe. And I go back into this color right here. Now I can do some freehand on the cloak too. We'll see what happens. It's got a lot of folds in it. Maybe we'll throw that on there. We'll see what it needs when we get towards the end there. So you can see just knocking some things down, establishing even more shadow in some areas. See, even make that a little darker here towards the bottom. And now I've got my sepia liner here, and I still got some of that blue liner in the brush. I'm going to do sort of a, we'll call it a dry glaze. How's that for you? I'm going to grab one of these guys here and pull away some of it. See how that took away some, but left the rest. Gonna do the same thing, hitting the green of that shrubbery there. Maybe even a touch or two on the hair. And now I'm just gonna grab a little bit of the maiden flesh and the maggot white, and all I want to do is just say, okay, roughly eye's gonna be about there, and we're gonna hit the skin tones. So I've got the clear red, touch of that sepia liner. I just don't want it to get too pinkish. There's even a little bit of blue that's working its way in there. Gonna get rid of some of the excess. And that just adds a little bit of rosiness to the cheeks. Take that clear red. I think we've got a touch of red liner over here. And now, get it where you can see it. Just throw some lips out there. Throw a few lights on. Get the well, not really even gonna go highlight yet on those cheeks, but just mark something that's lighter. I'm gonna go back to this here. We're gonna need a little water to get that activated up again. And I'm going to try and get a little more of the... It's all about blood vessels tend to be, obviously, fingers. You don't want those to be too grayed down because you tend to have those capillary right there on the, again, on the ends of your fingers there, lots of blood vessels and such. And then just starting to play off of those, either what was initially light or initially dark. And I always have some of my colors around here to grab and play off of. See, even this brush I like to sort of make it into a filbert. And even at this stage, things are still pretty darn messy. Just gonna get that lower lip a little lighter here. And I always have, since I have my paint all around me, I can always dive in when I need it. Grab some more. And I can just keep making alterations if I feel it's just too light an area. I can knock it down. At this point, not worried about, oh, is it super smooth here or super smooth there? And there we go. Now I might, let's say I want to add a little more of a shadow area to the face. So I'm taking a little touch of that red liner in there. But I don't want it to get too rosy. So I throw a little bit of the clear yellow in there. So that way I can get a little more. Yeah, now it's a little more equal to the other side. Just needed a little more shape right there, but let's hit some reflected light on that. Let's see if that's enough. Yeah, there we go. So see how the chin now gets a little bit lighter. And if at a certain point you don't hear my voice, that's not the speakers cutting out. That is me most likely just holding my breath, because it's one way to steady your brush, holding your breath, literally slowing down your heartbeat. And I've got to figure out, so what do we want to do here? We still have this clear blue. Going to grab a little bit of this green here. And the idea is to make something that's kind of on the saturated side. That's what I needed right there. So it's not, we're not black lining or anything like that. We're just needed a little bit of a darker line there. And then it's all right, just hit the camera. See, we can shade that down a touch. But I've got my not maiden flesh, but my off-white maggot white here. We'll lighten this up. Lighten this up, and we'll go right along that line. We'll go down here. So you can see it's a little easier to follow this with obviously the finer brush. May need to throw some more of our maggot white out here. Just get a few more touches of that. And these feathers here, I have to decide, do I want them to just be white like this? That's a little bit on the boring side. Well, they're not white, they're plenty off-white. But I'm going to say maybe I want some kind of eagle feather thing going on. And it's got some blue liner. And the sepia liner, let's see if we can just kind of do a little, darken this down a bit. And yeah, basically that, the end of the feather there, that making it look sort of like a eagle feather. I think some hawk feathers also tend to be darker at the end. Adding it again, even a few more darks to the hair. And then these pieces on the hair, they need to be more pronounced somehow. I'm just throwing some more darks on that. And some here. Because sometimes you just need a little more contrast. Like here against the face. So what we're going to do, I'm going to hit now that I've got this color here, because I've been working with a little sepia liner, let's get some more on there. I'm going to go back to the dress here. And we'll throw a little bit of a glaze over the top of that. I'll even let it work its way into the blue of the shirt there. And just leave that go. And up here, remember we wanted to add some kind of a greenish tint to that staff. Let's see what happens. So I got it here. Looks like that's in focus. And remember, this is not the finest brush that we got here. So yeah, like that. That sort of tones it down a little bit. Because that weathered wood tends to be a greenish gray. It doesn't... Wood is very seldom brown. And I know that pretty much every paint color that's brown seems to be named after wood. Sandalwood, such and such wood, whatever. So at this point, what I'm going to do is let this set up for just a few minutes, and then we'll get into, maybe we'll focus in on the face and the hair, and we'll just focus more on some details. We're going to get more into some detailed areas on this. We've got pretty much everything set up. We've got this mapped out pretty well. We know how light or dark we want this to be. Let's get into our face, and I think at this point I will, believe it or not, oh my goodness, put white out on the palette. That's not something you see very often. And as I say all the time, pretty much save it for the very end. That was just drilled into my head of years of painting. And now, because we waited to have that out there, that means it's going to have a big impact wherever it goes. So I think that's good where you can see it. So now the eyes are going to stand out more. Obviously we'll put some irises in there and everything else. But even on our hair, if we take the yellow and the white and go like so, now we start to have some really intense highlights on the hair, a little more so than what we had before. And I don't want to get too wrapped up in that down here, but I think it gives you an idea of what it is we're trying to do. Same thing here, this cascade of hair. Try to find some highlights here just in some areas. And on the bracelets here, can even go a little lighter. And we'll leave that at that. And remember the feathers, not leaves. See, I can just pop in a few lights in here. Change that up. And we'll go on the other shoulder here, same thing. So I can just try and put in a little bit of feather texture there. And I saved myself that last little bit of light. All the while it was pretty much planned ahead because, well, I've done that a million times before. I knew that if I didn't throw white out on the palette, I would have that one last little ace in the hole. Alright, so we have all that light. Well, we got to go the other way here. We got some red liner. Let's start to get some darks on the face now. I may have to hold this at a weird angle that is not the ideal place for you to see it. But let's try and get some eyebrows and eyelids. So we're going to be cutting that down. I just need to get it on the figures. So see what we've got there? We're not outlining the entire eye, just this little arc right here. That's all I wanted. Now the other eye, it's going to be much tougher for you to see. Just because of where I got to hold it. Trying to work my way over to the corner. And sometimes what I'll do is go back and forth. So there it was easier for me to get the dark in there and then come back. And then reestablish. See how I've kind of, normally I would paint in that iris there, but it was just easier for me to drop in a little bit of the white around it. So here I'm just trying to do the same thing on the other side. Again, it's tougher because there's a pole in the way. One more touch of white there. And then back to a red liner. Sometimes I use brown liner, sometimes I use blue liner. I tend to just kind of vary that up from one to the next. No necessarily rhyme or reason. And the idea is just kind of looking off to the left. Now, if for whatever reason, I'm going to throw a little bit of red out here. This is something I like to do. I'm going to take this green like we sort of did before. This is that shadow under the eye color here once again. What it is, it's kind of a way to cheat on your eyebrows and your eyelids. You can sort of refashion those maybe the way you want them to be. So see, now that's more of a darker greenish color. Well, I guess now I can take a touch of that maiden flesh, lighten it up. Lighten that up and just ever so slightly. See what we're going to do? We're going to lighten that up. I know it doesn't necessarily show on camera. I am going to try doing this a little bit. There we go. So I just increased the color intensity a little bit. Now that matches more what I see. Yeah. So you see how that's a little bit more greenish, and that's a little more on the rosy side. And I may just play a little more. Speaking of rosiness here, I'm just going to see if I can't intensify that on the cheekbone here. Ever so slightly. And then I see I've got an area. Hopefully I can sneak this down in here. There. That just needed a little touch of refinement right there. So now I've got some of those. I try not to necessarily do the ruby red lips on everything. Sometimes it works out okay, but it can get to be a little too much sometimes. This is a little darker here. I'm going to try and extend the upper lip a touch there. Might work my way back to the lower lip here. Try not to make that too harsh of a line. Try to get some highlight about there. And if it's too much, I can always tone it down. Tone it down a touch. Like that. Now let's see if we can't get ourselves some more lights on the face. Again, don't want to go crazy with that. Here on the upper lip. And that's gonna, that chin, you can start to see that the face starts to pull out a little bit more and emerge. Clavicles there. Chest, I've got to get a touch of pink on this. Again, that shadow area just has too much shadow. Not even sure if you could see that at all. Think so. And I need to do the same sort of little thing that I did on the other side with the eyebrow. Let's see if I can manage that. Just about. And then, once again, have to bring some light down into this corner here on the cheek. So again, trying to hold my breath and steady, slow down the old heartbeat. Yeah, let's lighten this up a touch. So by default, again, we're creating that eyebrow. So she has a little more of a gypsy style look. And need to get some more lights here. I got just enough left of my white there. On the arms. Back to the cheekbone. Touch on the nose. And sometimes you just put too much on there and you can feather that out. And what I need to actually do is, believe it or not, I need to lighten up the eye that's on the other side. I could darken down the other one, but I kind of like the other one being lighter. So there we go. And I'm going to throw some brown liner out here. Do a few things. Let's see if we can't get back into the eyebrow here. Again, just trying to move this where you can see it. Just trying to get a little expression on the face, since these just have faces that are well sculpted. They have plenty of expression on them. Why not take advantage of that? Even get back into some of these feathers here. So even though I'm in the middle of doing the face, I am still going to think about the other areas here. Just thinking maybe I need to strengthen some lines or shadows here and there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this whole thing a veil here. So we're going to go to a slightly different plan on this. I'm just not seeing a part in the hair, so I'm going to go back to my blues here a bit. I'm going to get out some of the off-white Maiden Flesh. And I'm going to make this a little more defined. Ah, good. Looks like you can see that. And while I still got some of my liner out here. Like so. And just kind of working this back and forth, getting a little bit of shading. I don't want super hard outlines there. Take a little bit of the maiden flash to lighten that up. And it will also gray it down. So it's not bouncing too much off of our hair color. And I'm going to also now take advantage of that, do a few of these lights here on the cloak. And if those get too intense, then it can always be knocked down. Just give it more of a color. So now I just basically took the green, mixed it with some of the blue, it tones those down, and now it extends that light a little bit. I'm going to go into here. I think, yeah, we got it in a good spot. And just enough to separate that. Gonna get a little bit of that greenish blue into there too. Then I'm gonna lighten this up. I know that's a fold, but it's up towards the top, and that was the bad habit that I was in for years, was making the shadows, say, on the top of a cloak as dark as the shadows near the ground, and making the highlights near the bottom of the cloak as light as the highlights up near the top. And it registers as nice shading, no problem there. But it doesn't have a whole lot of depth to it, let's say. And we'll get in here with some darks now, just like I was talking about before. I'm going to take some of that green, some of that blue. I don't want every shadow to just be super dark. I'm trying to actually throw a little bit of green into the shadows there. I don't know if you can see that. It's just a touch. And even in some of the recesses of the hair, because now it'll maybe look like it's falling over the cloak and less like just a yellow mop that was thrown over the cloak. It helps that transition a little bit. I even throw a little bit of that on this staff here. Now there's some things I just can't quite reach or get on camera for you. So if you see the finished miniature and say, oh man, I don't remember seeing that. Well, it just was something that it was too hard to get it on camera. So I've got the maiden flash, some of that sepia liner. Just working the folds here. I'm going to take a little bit of green. And work that into here. good. You can see that. So we're going to work that into that shadow area there. Again, even up into those feathers. Let's get this a little lighter up here. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that I wanted it to be more on the tannish side. But I also don't want it to get too close to the skin color. I was tempted to grab a little bit of yellow and throw that in there, but as soon as I did that, then it would start to look a lot like the hair. So yeah, this is sort of a common color choice for me when I just have to, I don't have a whole bunch of time to ponder over what it is I want to do with a figure, or there is no specific color scheme handed down. And I'm going to grab a little bit of red liner. Not blue, we want red liner. Touch of that. And it's something I like to mix with the sepia tone. Makes it pretty nifty dark. And speaking of reds, we haven't forgotten our interior of our cloak at all. So let's take that red liner there. And you can see how we've got a light here and a light here, but it's dark next to that and then dark over here. I don't want to screw around with that too much. Just need a little bit more on the interior of this side. This is looking a little dark, a little bland. So that's very translucent. That's why it's, in a way, I don't want to say blending itself, but it's less, you just don't notice it so much. And there we go. I'll just add a little bit of extra light there along that edge. That's because it might be catching some light, and that's it. And I'm going to go to this. And let's get some of that clear yellow back out here again. I'm going to throw a touch of that white. I want to see what I can do with, there's a couple of these gemstone type things here. Some right here. There's another one over here. And what the heck, I'm going to actually throw a few, hit that staff in a few places. Just toss a little bit right there on that cheek. And just trying to get a little separation there. Let's get a little more yellow into that. There's just one here. There's another one there. It's like a little band. It sort of runs across the face there. And get back to my white here. Let's make that a little more of a pinkish color there. And drop a few lighter colors. We got to do something on the hand. We don't want to forget about the hand. See if we can, we don't want to lose the shadow here. So that's about enough, and maybe we got a few, some kind of lighter areas on that staff too. I'm going to throw some make sure that's where you can see it. You can see how there's greens there, there's orangey reds over here, there's yellows in some places. Every so often I just have to get rid of the excess paint. Thumb palette is perfect for that. And again, sorry if I go a little bit quiet. Just doing that trick of holding my breath. Trying to get a little darker here. Just a touch darker. There's just a little bit of a touch there on that eye. So yeah, I'm not gonna do, I don't think I'm gonna mess around with the freehand here. I'm gonna keep it more like what the image was, just a touch more like that. But remember, we got all this stone down here. We've got some convenient greenish grays right here. We can get in here and start to work on those. We don't want it to be equally bright everywhere. Besides, again, we're going to be throwing some flock on this, probably some leaves. Got some flowers I think I might toss on there. That's going to be in the last segment here. We're just going to throw on these finishing touches, the last details. And we'll have our gypsy lady pretty well set. At this point, I want to throw some stuff on the base just to see what we have. See how well that is going to complement or contrast with the colors on the figure. Now I'm going to throw a little bit of this flock here. It's a few different colors that I mixed together. We'll see that might look good over the rocks to give them a little bit of a lichen type of thing. And we've got these guys. These are from Green Stuff World. Going to get the figure out of the way. So these are shrub tufts and flower tufts again. Green Stuff World. So the red, I think that would be too intense. Not enough red in the figure. So we've got here, basically this is probably a spring tuft right here. This one's probably a summer. But I'm just going to be a little bold. I've got that blonde here, and this, the idea is to bring the blonde here down to the base. I like to do that. Remember how we brought the blue into the blonde here? Let's do the blonde on the base. Now we could still potentially have some of these summer tufts next to spring or summer tufts next to these. So let's pop this sucker out. Actually, I don't think I've opened this package yet. Look at that. So here's our flower, and they're reasonably tall. So that's the other thing. These are more like bushes. Now I've also made my own. Let me see if I can grab these here real quick. I know this is great theater here. You can't see anything that I'm doing. But look at these. Now if I had, I think I've used up all my yellow ones. Now, these are ones that I've made myself. And you can see that these are a little bit taller. So I don't have the 6mm grass. I tried to make my own. So these, they're neat. They're red flowers. But first of all, these guys are too big. Those might work. But this is something else I'm going to maybe do on a video here. I'll see how practical that is. Again, I don't think this camera setup can handle it just too close, too tight. But we don't want to get too wrapped up in tufts, but I've seen a lot of decent figures get kind of wonky with tufts. I like these, and actually I know how I can make these because these are basically pieces of foam here. So that's, I'm going to try and make those type myself. So we got some super glue here. And I always, this one's pretty well covered with paint. Normally they don't have as much junk on them. But let's pick out some of these, see which ones we like. Now they do have adhesive on them, as you can see. But for whatever reason, once it gets on here, so that's not a bad one there. I got some excess grass here to pull off. We'll do that. Don't want to rip the flowers off. So what I'm going to do is throw a dot of glue. I'm going to go here with this. And now I drop my flowers in here. And the way I'm going to position this is there's kind of a flat side. It seems like all of these kind of have a flat side and then a side that pokes out, and you can see how that's hanging over the base there. It's kind of the side that pokes out. What I'm going to do is give that a press with my little tool here, and what that does is see how it's starting to set that down in there. It starts to look a little more like it should. And what I'm going to do around, I've also used my sand and gravel glue for that. But we've got here is, let's use our pin again, just looking to see if I've got a sharper one, but nope, all of those are elsewhere. So I'm just going to paint a little bit of this glue around here. I think you can see that. See, it's a little glossier. Right. And now this is also something you could use the sand and gravel glue for. But I'm going to get some of this flock here. And drop that down. Get rid of the excess. See how we started to meld the flower in. We get a little touch of green over there. So remember I said that the green would contrast a little more against the blue robe than it would just against, say, a straight up green rope, even if that green rope had a little gray in it. I like that. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So I'm trying to move my mic so you don't hear me just blowing in your face. Another choice decision time here. So first, what I want to do is push that back onto the figure. I like this here. $1,000,000 question is, does one go over here? If it does, you can see how tall that is. It's going to block some of this, but this right in here, there's not a lot going on in there. It's a shadow area, so that might complement the yellow. Well, we got to find, I kind of like that one, but that could be on the big side. Well, why not go for broke? Now you can do the tweezers thing. I think I've got myself a tweezers here. And one of these two. I'm gonna go for this one first and see what happens. Look at that, almost like I have dealt with miniatures before, or maybe not. And I think I'm gonna go with that towards the front. And I'm gonna place it there. Yeah. What the heck? No guts, no glory. Don't like it, we can always just yank the thing off of there. Deal with it later. So, here we go. And on to the base with you. Now what I like to do is push these down to spread them out a little bit. Sometimes the flowers are going to break off. That's just how it goes. And I'm going to shoot a little more glue in there so that I can do this little trick here. Something I only just recently started to do. Yeah, because before it was really obvious where I just had a tuft sitting there. So yeah, I lost some of my folds, but those are still there. But I kind of like how that works. Now I could even take some of these blossoms here. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do is, whoops, grab a little bit of this glue here. See this little green thing there? Now let's take I can use my tweezers. And I'm just going to drop that right there, and that'll stick on there. So that's another way to pull these out. Let's do it again. This is actually something I have not done before. So you're seeing yet another first time experiment. Trying to do it. Yeah. Boy, well, now I do this with my leaves and stuff, but I've never really done that before with flowers that come off. So why I never thought of doing that before, I don't know why. Don't know why. There we go. Just drizzle that a little bit. Gonna give that a few shots of compressed air, so to speak. So that works. Yeah. Tempted to drop another one in here. I think what I may do is one over here. I got like 2 or 3 of them sitting around, so let's grab this one because these are just bound to come off. Yeah, just a little piece of sponge that, yeah. See that it gives us different levels here. Yeah, now we have 1, 2, 3 levels. Get 1, 2, 3 levels. I like that. I was gonna normally put leaves around here, but boy, that's nifty. So again, those are green stuff world. Flower tufts, shrub tufts. I think that gives us a nice little conclusion to our dark sword Gypsy Lady. We even got to talk about, we talked about color schemes, basing. I try to cover as many different aspects of these as I can in the short amount of time that we have. So thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. That will probably be an oil painting demo. Thanks again for all your support on the Patreon page too, and especially those of you that pledged the Dark Sword level.